That was such a nice, warm welcome. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here and a little bit nervous to be your first morning speaker. So I'm hoping to kick the day off with some inspiration. What's that? Oh, good. Thank you. So I'm going to tell a story this morning about how I went from being an architect and a designer to being a high school teacher, and how the theme of this whole session, the power of knowledge, I also think that means to me the power of creativity and how creativity can inspire a different kind of knowledge, and specifically what that means for young people and how we can use creativity and knowledge and design to excite the next generation and to create a new generation of really, really engaged citizens that have a whole variety of tools to make change in the world. So my story starts with this man. This is a guy named Dr. Chip Zullinger. He was referred to as Dr. Z. And I met Dr. Z via email about 4 years ago now. I had founded a nonprofit called Project H in 2008. And the organization was about 2 years old when Dr. Z emailed me. And our projects up until that time had been a lot of architecture and design projects that were in some way beneficial to the community, to society. They had pretty strong social implications, designed for social impact. So Dr. Z tracked us down. He had seen a project that we had done in Uganda, and he was the superintendent of a very poor and very underperforming school district in rural North Carolina. And he said to us, I've seen your work, I really believe in design and creativity, and I don't think that there's enough of it in public education. So he invited us to come to the county where he was the superintendent of the public school district. And at the time, I was living in San Francisco, which is big and cosmopolitan, and Bertie County is neither of those things. So I showed up in Bertie County, and I met Dr. Z, and I realized this was a very interesting place. It was very, not just economically poor, but resource poor. It doesn't have a lot of access to professional services. Certainly no architects live in the county. The school districts are very much underperforming. The economy is pretty stagnant. It's an agricultural economy. And the downtown of the main town, Windsor, is pretty much empty. It's like a lot of other small towns in the South and in parts of the rest of the US where the downtown has become sort of a ghost town. And there's a lot of shells of empty buildings that are just sort of sitting there. So I showed up with my partner, Matt Miller, who's also an architect, and Dr. Z greeted us, and he said, okay, let's get to work. Let's do some projects. So his first call to action for us was to build these learning landscape playgrounds. This is the project that he had actually seen that we built in Uganda. It's an educational playground system that you can build really for free if you can find used tires and if you're willing to dig some holes and sweat a little bit. So for kids ages kindergarten to about 4th or 5th grade, this is a playground where you can play different kinds of games. We created about 50 different games so the kids can learn through activity and teamwork and running around and screaming and being a kid, and then also secretly learning math or science or foreign language at the same time. So we built 4 of these playgrounds with Dr. Z for the elementary schools. And then he said, oh, okay, that was great. Now here's 40 other projects that I would like you to do. So we did a renovation of some computer lab spaces for the high school because a lot of the students are performing below grade level. They're tested a lot to make sure that they're on track to get to the end of year test standard. And so they spend a lot of time in computer labs, but the computer labs are really boring spaces. So this is a challenge for us to make that technology, that tech-based learning more engaging and less of like a clinical sort of drill and kill, they call it, that kind of instruction. We also did this graphic design campaign. The school district, specifically Dr. Z, had found funding to put a free broadband internet connection in every home that had a student in the district. And for a rural county in North Carolina, this is a really big deal. Only about 8% of the population has access to high-speed internet. So for the school district to be the facilitator of a free connection for the county, both to each other, to other residents in the county, and then to the rest of the world was a really big deal. So we did this graphic design campaign and put these big blue dots everywhere just to get people talking, even if they were just saying, what the heck is that big blue dot? We wanted it to be a conversation starter around what the idea of connection could be. So we did these projects, and they were all really fun. They were, we got to build, we got to design, we got to work with some students and teachers, and obviously Dr. Z. But we realized that as designers, as working architects and designers who were working within a public school district, that's a really interesting intersection. There are not a lot of architects who get to have that kind of close contact with a school district and physically build projects that have an impact on the lives of the students and teachers. But also, B, that if we really wanted to be serious about working at that intersection between design and education, we needed to become teachers. And we needed to put design and this power of creativity that we really believe in, that needed to be in the classroom. There was a very acute need for the students who were unsuccessful in a lot of ways at the time. They needed a new way to engage with core subject content. And so we figured that design would be a great way to engage students in a different way. And then also, because design and architecture is so visible and physical, that we could produce projects for community benefit that would be seen by the community so that the community would see the school district and their youth as an asset in their future progress. So we wrote this curriculum called Studio H, and these 4 things in the middle: creativity, citizenship, capital, and critical thinking. As we got to know some of the students and the teachers, and as we personally, Matt and I, became very deeply attached to this place, we ended up moving there. These are the 4 things that we saw over and over again that the students really needed in order to be successful as young adults, and then also the 4 things that the community really needed in order to survive. Both the economic challenges of the county, and then also some of the very deep social and racial rifts between the white and black communities. These 4 things were assets that could potentially stitch the whole community together. So the Studio H curriculum was written on those 4 principles, but it has to fit within a public school structure, which is, as you might imagine, very bureaucratic, super rigid, and not the easiest place to inject creativity. So we wrote this curriculum as a 1-year program for high school juniors, so 11th graders. They're like 16 or 17 years old. And the basic idea was to teach design as creative problem solving, building skills as vocational training for jobs, and also just a more engaging way to learn through the hands. And then to work on projects that were initiated, researched, designed, developed, and built by students. And for those projects to be given to the community, to have a community benefit. And then over the summer, so this is 1 full year, and then over the summer was our construction phase, where we would go out and build this piece of architecture. So this is all in our heads. This seemed like, oh, that's an easy thing. That's not overly ambitious. The first day of school rolls around, though, and this is after we've gone through so many different layers of approvals and bureaucracy and paperwork and credentials and blah, blah. And so we get the curriculum approved, and then our students show up on the first day, and Matt and I realize that our training as architects has not prepared us to be high school teachers. We don't know what to do with a classroom full of teenagers. They're loud, they don't want to listen. It's 9 in the morning, we're hanging out in a barn with a bunch of wood and metal shop equipment, and they're just completely disoriented, and so are we. So there's a pretty steep learning curve for all of us. They're coming to the class with very little foundational skills. Most of them are reading below grade level, very far below grade level. Many of them have never had an art class, ever. Most of them cannot read a ruler, and so we're lacking all these really basic foundational skills. So we realize if we're ever going to talk about design, or if we're ever going to build architecture, we have to start at the very beginning. So this is an exercise we did with a green bell pepper to teach what we call how to see, how to look at an object and represent it visually, how to do a plan, a section, an elevation, and how to interpret your physical world. And then because they had never had art class, we talked about the color wheel. What's a primary color? How does understanding the color wheel, how will that help us communicate our ideas to the world? And then in the wood shop, how to not cut your finger off, how to read a ruler, and then now that you know how to read a ruler, how to read an architectural scale, how to draw something to a scale and then produce it. And then also just like overcoming the fear of tools in the first place. I had a lot of female students who were just terrified of tools. They wanted nothing to do with tools. So a lot of it was just confidence building, that like, yes, you can pick up that router, and not only can you pick it up, you can make something really awesome with it. So I'm going to show the two projects that we did. The first one was very much a response to the context. And I went to architecture school and design school, and architecture at its core is always a response to a context. And so the context of Bertie County is that it's a big poultry industry. The biggest employer is Purdue, which is a very large-scale industrial poultry farming entity. So a lot of our students have chickens on their families' farms, and that's what they know. They know chickens, 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 500,000 of them on their family farm. So we wanted to say to students, this is the context, this is what we know, but what's another way to look at it? What's a different way to look at what we already know and to put a spin on it that's more positive and more better for all of us, not just in economics, but also in the well-being of these animals and how we engage with them. So we asked them to design chicken coops. These are our two chickens that we had in the classroom, Henrietta and Jezebel. They were our clients, and we spent a lot of time with them and got to know how they lived and how they ate and slept and laid eggs. But for our students, this is totally foreign. Like, they're used to taking a test and turning it in and getting a grade. And so when I said, design a chicken coop and build 50 models, they looked at me like I was crazy. They're like, why? I built one. Why do I need to build 49 more? But this is a muscle that needs exercising for a lot of these kids, that you can always do better, and you have to iterate and do things a bunch of times before you get to something that will really work. So I'll show you the 3 coops that we ended up building that show this process. This one was inspired by Buckminster Fuller and some of the geometric architecture that he is so famous for, the geodesic dome. This student did a bunch of these really beautiful models and was just playing with like how you could take something simple, a flat piece of cardboard, and turn it into something pretty complex. This is the coop, the model that he wanted to build. And this one took us a really long time to figure out how to build it, because how do you make something that is bending and twisting like that, but is also going to stand up and be structurally sound? So that process of prototyping and doing something that totally fails and then having to fix it was really important for us as teachers and for them to go through also. So this coop, we had to raise this thing up into the air. It took the entire class to twist it and pull it and bend it into shape. And eventually we got it to look like the model. They learned how to weld. We did some basic structural MIG welding, and then used a rubberized roof paint to keep the water out, to weatherize it. And then this is the final coop that they built, and the team that built it. This was, I think, my favorite of the 3, because we really struggled through how to build this thing. We had this idea, it looked great as an idea, but all the learning happens when you have to go from the idea to the real world. So this was a really big adventure for all of us. The other 2 were also really cool. This was one where I took this photo, and then the model that they had built fell over, and it was sitting on its corners, the model, and they looked at it and they were like, oh, that's a lot cooler, we should build it like that. And that's what we did. It ended up being this really happy accident. This is the interior, the run space, so the chickens could go back and forth between the 2 boxes. And then the final coop. And then the other one was interesting because the students took into account not only how to design for the chickens, but how to design for the people who were taking care of the chickens. So it had these 2 big swinging doors so that you could access the roosting box and also the food and water area. So the last chapter of the story, the big project that we did, was that we did chicken architecture, and we felt like this was pretty successful, and our students had a good foundation. But we went into this thinking we're going to build something for our town. We're going to build something for our community, something that is architectural in scale and that contributes something to the landscape of this town. Unfortunately, we're having these conversations on the heels of a flood that destroyed the entire town. So for our students, they're wanting to build something new, but the town is thinking about how do we just build back and get back up and running. So it was both a really awkward but also opportune time to be having conversations about what the future of the town looks like. The mayor, who's a great guy and was our next door neighbor, gave us this piece of land. And he said, whatever you guys want to build, you can build it here. This is right on the way into town. So it's a really prime spot. The students and the mayor and a lot of people from around town had identified that this is an agricultural county, but the public health is really low. There's a really high obesity rate. It's a food desert. There's almost no access to fresh fruit or produce. So let's build a farmer's market. And this idea, this wasn't something that Matt and I said, we are here, we're going to build a farmer's market. It came totally from our students and from the community saying this is something that we all want. So just like the chicken coops, they went through the design process. They presented their ideas to the town. This is one of the town councilmen. And I love this photo because I don't think these two people ever would have met if it weren't for this project. And they got to talk about an idea they both really believed in. And I think that's the power of creativity and design also, that it puts disparate people in the same room having really wonderful conversations together. And then having to figure out, like, okay, we have these great ideas, but we have to build this thing. This isn't just like a model that we're going to build and put on a table. We have to physically build this thing. We have to build it in 3 months with $60,000, a construction crew of 16-year-olds in a hurricane zone and a flood zone. So this is like a really tall order for anyone, let alone a group of teenagers. So presenting the final models and ultimately deciding on one that was familiar. This is inspired by some of the local architecture, but also elevated in a way that says we're thinking about the future and we want to bring dignity and honor to the place that we love. So the summer rolls around and it's 102 degrees Fahrenheit. Everyone's like just excited for the school year to be over, and yet we have a 2,000 square foot building to construct. So the students showed up on site and they started digging. We laid the foundation. We built the trusses for the building and had to raise them up, which was really cool because actually none of us was licensed to use this giant piece of machinery, but we did anyway. So a lot of it was just like, let's make it happen no matter what it takes. And then our students were there every day. They were so awesome. They were sweating and miserable some days, but this was the thing that they believed in, and they were going to see it through to the end just like we were. So opening day came around and the building was finished miraculously. We invited all of the town, our friends, our families, the vendors. Obviously we had to start the farmers market also, so all these vendors that we had recruited were moving into this building for the first time. And this was, for our students, this was the home run. I mean, this is the moment where they're seeing every decision they made about this building, every model that they built, every nail that they hammered, being used in the way that they had designed it by their neighbors and their friends and people that they knew. So just to finish up here, I mean, this is a photo from the opening ceremony, and for my student Karan in the striped shirt, he said, I want to bring my kids back here someday and tell them that I built this. And I think for me, this had nothing to do with my role as an architect. It wasn't about me. It was never about me. It was about the kids and them having a vision and being able to gather the tools to make it real. The following year, our students were really inspired by the farmers market and built smaller farm stands around the county to expand on this idea that we had planted this seed in the farmers market and they wanted to see that grow. And now we're taking this idea of design-based education to other schools. We're at a school in Berkeley right now, and our students are building their own classroom because the facilities are very constrained. So my work has been a really big adventure in the past couple of years, and I owe a lot of it to Dr. Z to even have given us the invitation. But for me, this idea of the power of knowledge is really synonymous with the power of creativity. And that these three words, this is our motto, design, build, transform. Even if you're not a designer or an architect, these are the three things that I really believe will change the world. That design is about creativity and having ideas and believing in possibility. Building is about putting in the work and the sweat and the grit to make those things happen. And then transformation, in that everything that we do, and no matter what our role is, we can always find a way to do what we do for the benefit of others, and that's what we should seek out. So, thank you very much.